Ask Reddit, addicts of Reddit, what was your rock bottom that made you realize you had to stop? Hi friend, before this video starts and we get to the first story, I would like to tell you that I will post a story about my personal experience at the end. I was a serious alcoholic for many years. 5 years ago, I ended up in a coma. 2 weeks later, I woke up and never looked back. I feel like a part of me died. I lost a lot of friends, family, money, etc., but I'm happy with the outcome. I have 2 brothers. Both of them have a fentanyl addiction. The youngest one, in his 20s, died 3 days ago. We both found him and tried to save him, saw things we will never forget. The other brother is now 2 days clean in detox and getting ready to start rehab after finishing. Hopefully, he never looks back either. Not an addict myself, unfortunately he only realized he really needed to stop right before it killed him. My fiancé was a severe alcoholic. At his worst, he drank half a gallon of vodka a day. He'd been trying to quit for a while, off and on. I kept trying to get him to stop. I'd go to doctor's appointments with him and he would always avoid saying he was an alcoholic because he didn't want it on his medical record. He hadn't been feeling well for a while. He had to quit drinking 2 or 3 days before because we were broke, and he asked me to take him to the hospital. We got into triage and the nurse was going through intake questions with him, and he said, "I am an alcoholic." That shocked me. That's how I knew it was rock bottom, because he'd been so adamant that no medical professional know he's an alcoholic, but this time, he didn't even hesitate. His liver was failing, and a week later, he died. I wish so badly that he could have gotten better and turned it around. I really think he could have if he survived, but I also think he knew it was the end. I had my first drink when I was 16. By 18 I was drinking whole liter bottles of scotch every night. I used to get drunk and cut myself up with my razor. I was severely depressed. I hated myself. Every minute of my life was spent waiting until my next drink, figuring out how I was going to afford my next bottle. I tried to end myself so many times. I slept with strangers twice my age. I stole and sold precious items. I used to do anything for my next drink. Then at 21 I was engaged to my fiancé. I realized he was working very hard to start a future for us where we could be happy. He would clean my blood up with no distaste on his face. He used to ask if he could please just watch, because at least that way he would be able to give me first aid if I went too deep or did too much. He's a good man. I realized that if I kept drinking, he was going to move on, and I'd lose him. I went to rehab last year, I'm 23 now, and sober. I don't even smoke cigarettes anymore. My body is covered in heavy scarring. My bloods just came back last month as good. I fully healed physically. We're still planning the wedding. For me, it was because I realized I was about to lose my future. I started drinking heavily around 15 years old and escalated in college. I would party all the time and get absolutely blasted. Like down a whole bottle, pee your pants, and puke all over drunk every time. This continued for 2 years until I dropped out. Even though I wasn't enrolled anymore, I still went to homecoming and stayed at my friend's house. I lived far away, and so by the time I arrived at her house party people were already tipsy, so I had to catch up, obviously. I had only eaten French fries that day, and started downing mixed drinks, mostly Dr. Pepper with vanilla Smirnoff, that were more vodka than mixer, and in no time I was caught up, and then kept drinking. I barely remember anything about that party, but I vividly remember passing out on my back on a futon in the living room, and being in that weird semi-conscious state where you can't do anything with your body or talk, but you can hear everything going on. I remember someone saying, "Should we help her?" and one of my friends saying, "Nah, she's always like this." Then I threw up all over my own face, still lying in my back, and no one helped. Just a lot of "oh, ew, gross" coming from the people around me. I woke up caked in my own vomit all over my face, hair, and in my ears. I took a shower and took my friend's bedding to the laundromat, sincerely apologized, and didn't drink again until 3.5 years later, when I started drinking responsibly. It's been 12 years and yes, I occasionally get drunk, 2-3x a year, but not to the point where I'm peeing my pants or puking. I'll have a drink if I'm out on a date or feel like a beer with dinner, but I don't drink most of the time. Most importantly, I don't drink for the same reasons. I drank then because I was having a mental breakdown and didn't know how to cope with it. Now I drink because I sometimes enjoy a drink and can do it responsibly. My aim isn't to get so blitzed I die anymore. Mine was only weed, but I was spending around $600 a week. My rock bottom was spending my dog's home euthanasia savings on drugs. She had a brain tumor, so I had the money aside so she could go comfortably when the time was right. She was my closest family and meant the world to me. I'd have traded our places in a second if I could have. She was all the goodness in my life. I ended up quitting cold turkey, did some extra work and sold a bunch of my possessions to remake the money within a week. Was just in time to, because she needed that money a few days later. The realization that I had put my addiction before the comfort of my beloved dying dog was my turning point. When my best friend and partner of 7 years left me. When I experienced stim psychosis and couldn't leave the house. It lasted a long time. Second scariest experience of my life. When that happened again and I got hospitalized multiple times. This period of psychosis was the scariest time in my life. When I realized all my friends were gone or keeping their distance. I'm making this post with no intention of deleting it like 90% of what I post in hopes it will make me more accountable. I overdosed recently on some Xanax, been addicted to Fent for close to 3 years now and was using heroin before then. Woke up in the hospital with no hearing and realized I have no friends, either dead or couldn't handle watching me tear myself apart from closer than an arm's length. I've been running around the last 6 years, lashing out at myself and hurting others in the process. It made me feel selfish and uncaring. I've been on a Suboxone taper since, and through all the shit I had out the moment I got back. 14th time is the charm or some shit. Well, I didn't really agree that my bottom was bad enough, but I had just gotten kicked out of college for my usage, lived a lowly life for a few months, got 2 felony possession charges, and was put in an ultimatum by my family, so I wound up in rehab. I didn't plan on staying sober, but I guess that the closest thing I had to a bottom realization was when a counselor in that rehab asked me if I was going to stay sober after the 90-day program. I said I didn't know, and he said, well, give this sober life and program, AA, a real, genuine, honest try for a year, and if your life isn't better in some way by then, you've always got both options, meaning I can always relapse, the drugs and alcohol will always be out there, and, given that I don't die on a relapse, there will always be AA to remain in or return to. I did stay technically sober for that time, but I wasn't really a better person yet. I wasn't taking it very seriously, and I got arrested again for something really dumb 11 MO into that year. Never relapsed, but that last arrest just showed how my character was truly faulty, particularly even. Getting fired. Having to tell my spouse who was unaware of my issue, I functioned very well. Then getting served divorce papers while I was entering treatment 2 weeks later. My home became the treatment center for 90 days, and when I was finished, I had nowhere to go since my spouse took possession of the house. So I was homeless, penniless, jobless. That pretty much incentivized me to continue on my path of recovery. Probably my rock bottom was when I had been kicked out of my house a few years and was bad on crack, so how I used to get money for my dose was I stole an urn from a house and emptied the ashes out and would collect ashes from random fires I lit under bridges and get sunglasses and a cane and walk around with the urn, pretending to be blind and bump into people and knock the urn so the ashes would spill out and start crying, and give people a sob story about how they're my dead mother's ashes, and that I was homeless and that was all I had of her to try keep me going on cold nights, and people would feel bad, they'd give me as much as they could for a hotel or whatever, and as you know, hotels aren't cheap, so I'd go and get lit off my brains and then repeat the cycle, and it worked for quite a bit until I done it so high one time that instead of sympathy I got a smack and was dazed, and when I finally came through I looked up and thought I saw God, but no, it was my own damn mother. So she dragged me up and got me into treatment, and we're okay now, but she says she knows who isn't gonna be getting her ashes when she dies. I broke my phone for a week and I almost lost my mind. No, I don't have an addiction to my phone or social media. Since I was about 9 years old, unfortunately, I was granted unlimited and unsupervised access to the internet, and as a result, my curiosity led me to what later became an insatiable porn addiction. That addiction then morphed into a bigger demon than I could have ever imagined, because as a girl, I struggle with it on a more complex level. I dated guys and strung them along knowing that I would always bail before we got a chance to be intimate. I was deeply insecure in myself, and my addiction consistently pacified that feeling. It also changed my sexual preferences, kinks, fetishes, etc., so I was terrified that I'd be found out. I was scared shitless to do or ask for anything outside of the norm, given that I didn't know what in the F the norm was. I then discovered later on in my life that the brain can't tell the difference between watching physical actions like sex and actually participating in them, so I essentially exposed my underdeveloped mind to that without knowing the full extent of the horrors of the internet. I'll often use the analogy that people who chain smoke by the pack usually started off by only smoking a few. You will always have to up the ante when you start to get desensitized, because you're building up a tolerance to the addiction. It's a never-ending chase of the first high, and because of that, I'll have to take the secrets of where my addiction took me to the grave. Looking back at my life now, I realize how many of my actions were rooted in my porn addiction. I have zero impulse control, and that has become the source of a lot of other problems as well. My mental health is the result of hundreds of hours spent in isolation, a lot of which were spent feeding into my addiction. Dating as a girl who's a recovering porn addict is difficult as well, because I don't want to swap one sex addiction for the other. Luckily, I made prioritizing my sobriety my New Year's resolution, and it's been going well. Getting help in Sex Addicts Anonymous has also helped me through a whole lot of healing, so I highly recommend seeking out a meeting near you if you're struggling. Thank you for sticking until the end. As I mentioned at the start of the video, I had a story to share about addiction as well. Background: when I was 16, I used to party a lot. In my home country, there are a lot of parties being held for people above 16, as it's legal to drink starting at that age here. It's only legal to drink anything besides hard liquor. I had a rough time around 15 to 16. I just gotten out of a longer relationship where my ex cheated on me. I felt very down. I just started working out, as I always was the chubby kid who got bullied. I discovered alcohol around that time, starting with beer, champagne, and wine, but pretty soon I got to harder liquor with some friends. I used to drink basically every weekend. This specific night, I was feeling very sad, so I decided to buy a whole bottle of vodka and a bottle of whiskey, cheapest I could find. Then I mixed them both in a plastic bottle, which gave me about 1.5 liters of pain relief. I headed into a nearby town where one such 16-plus party was being held. I started drinking during the train ride there, and once I got to the spot, I was pretty tipsy. I met a few friends and we started all drinking together. Some even tried a sip of my drink, though nobody liked it. Really wonder why. I thought my combos were good. I mean it sarcastically. When the time came to enter the party, I had about a third of the bottle left, so what did my stupid 16-year-old ass think? Well, there goes nothing, as I emptied out the whole bottle in one go. All I remember from that point on was entering the party. Afterwards, I lost all memories of what happened. According to a few friends, I was doing good, dancing and having fun. Then I became silent, and I fell straight on my face. My friend had to call the ER, and I was rushed to the hospital. I woke up next day, at first confused about where I am, but as soon as I realized I had no clothes on, and my room looked different than usual, I did a speed run of sobering up and realized I woke up in the hospital. Well, if that ain't bad enough, my parents were there. The sheer disappointment in their eyes just fed me up. I felt a sense of shame so big like never before. I just wished I could have sunken into the ground. They were understanding and reasonably pissed at me. Ever since then, I realized my limits and decided to never go overboard like that ever again. Later, I found out that the nurse that had to take care of me when I had thrown up all over myself was a friend. I met her at a party, and yes, she is the one that removed my clothes. It was embarrassing talking about it, but she was understanding and never made fun of me. God bless that woman. Thank you very much for watching. Take care and remember to stay hydrated, friend.